The alarm does do some work in that kind of game, and not having access to Jeskai Ascendancy is a big cost too, because Ascendancy unchecked is much more powerful than anything Jim can bring to bear in this matchup.
Well, we join these players on game 3. On Jim's side of the board, he has a Mantis Rider and a Seeker of the Way, having tapped out for both this turn. Sam at 18 life. On Sam's side of the board, it is 4 lands. He plays a 5th as a Temple. You see a lot of trading has happened so far. Bioblight and Hero's Downfall have taken care of a pair of Rabble Masters on Jim's side.
And Sam there really needed untapped land number 5 to be either able to play Jace's Ingenuity or Dig Through Time this turn, and I think that turn off, if Sam has no play this turn, might be the difference in the game.
Yeah, it certainly is something he would want to have. We go back over to Jim. Jim with 5 power in play and looks to have a fair amount of red spells in hand. Ash Cloud Phoenix among others. Right, Sam's still at a healthy 18 life. That damage he took off Mantis Rider was the first damage he'd taken this game.
Yeah, it looks like he fended off some early pressure with some removal. He played a Radiant Fountain for some life, so he's still got some time. But I feel like he really needed an untapped 5th land there on that turn, given what his hand looks like.
Yeah, certainly taking a turn off is going to hurt a lot here. And Jim's going to go for a swing of 5. Sam will take the entire hit. That puts him to 13. Or maybe lower. We'll see whether Jim decides to go for a kill spell. I believe he's going to go for a Stoke the Flames before damage here. So Stoke will attempt to deal 4. Sam does have the Disdainful Stroke for it, so it'll only prowess the Seeker of the Way, but that should put Sam down to 12 instead of 13.
And the Disdainful Stroke there is not too bad for Jim, because he still gets the prowess trigger, and it's 1 Disdainful Stroke out of the hand for him to try to open up a door for Ash Cloud Phoenix, which is a pretty powerful way to play around Crux of Fate.
Yeah, Jim has 2 remaining cards, actually. Ash Cloud Phoenix and Treasure Cruise. Both of them are pretty good here. And he'll go for Treasure Cruise, but here's the second Disdainful Stroke from Sam, and that was a pretty good prize for Sam to nab.
Yeah, that one's way better than hitting the copy of Soak the Flames, for example.
Well, yeah, I mean, that could have been a disastrous turn for Sam. His hand was Jace's Ingenuity, Dig Through Time, Disdainful Stroke, and Sam got to spend all 4 of his mana that turn, which is just huge.
Yeah, if Jim just passes the turn, I'm not saying that's a correct play, but given what Sam's hand looks like, it's really bad, because the next turn he has 5 mana, and if Jim starts pressuring his mana that turn, he has to decide between counter spells or casting one of his card drawers. This lined up way better for Sam, where he gets to go ahead and use all of his mana that turn, where it looked like he might have to take the turn off, and now can fire his Jace's Ingenuities, Dig Through Times, and maybe find other spells to follow up with.
So back over to Sam's turn. He's going to main phase cast Dig Through Time, gets to look at 7 cards. His remaining card in hand is a copy of Jace's Ingenuity, so he has plenty of card draw, but he is taking some heat right now. At 12, there's 5 power on the board for Jim. Both players now with 1 card in their hand. Sam to go up to 3, just needs to stay alive. You see a copy of Silumgar out of the sideboard. That's been put into his hand. That certainly is one way he can stabilize here. Also a option to take some negates. I think Sam's showing some concern for getting burned out.
Well, he has to answer the board first. That's going to be the first order of business.
Yeah. Silumgar was one of the takes. He took a blue card along with it, so maybe not an answer for the board just yet. Jim's draw a copy of Bramaz. He'll swing for 5. Does Sam have an answer? I think he goes down to 7. And yeah, these creatures getting in for multiple hits is not where Sam wants the deck to be going.
Because even Slumgar might not be fast enough to stabilize this board. I mean, it's not a bad starting point, but he's looking at taking at least 1 more hit next turn. And that might be enough to just push him out of the game.
And Jim will pass. Opting not to play any of his additional creatures. Doesn't want to get Perilous Vaulted or Crux of Fated.
Well, I think the big thing, too, is he also doesn't want to play into Sam's open mana, because Sam probably has to commit something to the table right now to be able to keep up in this game. And at that point, now you can tap out for your Ash Cloud Phoenix, you know?
Yeah. And there's the tap out. Sam's going to go for the copy of Silumgar. Jim looks at his hand. Sam was waiting for a counterspell, but there is no counterspell, just creatures in Jim's hand. So go back over Jim, though, with a pretty nice draw here. It's a copy of Mantis Rider.
Mantis Rider is pretty potent here.
He can play it and force 5 damage across. He will lose one of his Mantis Riders, but it will put Sam to 2. Jim does have a copy of Ash Cloud Phoenix, so that does represent 2 damage.
Exactly. He can, for example, he can play Mantis Rider this turn, attack. Sam blocks one of the Mantis Rider, falls to 2. Jim can then play Ash Cloud Phoenix post-combat. If Sam attacks, the Ash Cloud Phoenix goes face down, and Jim has the requisite mana to unmorph for lethal next turn. So it puts Sam in a spot where he basically needs to attack and then use a sweeper to be able to win the game. Now, it's still risky for Jim because if the sweeper is Crux of Fate, Sam gets to keep Solemnguard.
Right. So Solemnguard could swing, turn it face down, and Crux of Fate away on the non-dragons.
So Jim may actually do something like attack you, play Bramaz, and play the Ash Cloud Phoenix, and leave the Mantis Rider as a haste threat if he assumes that Sam has to tap out for Crux of Fate to have a chance to keep up in this game. Because
Yeah,
the Crux of Fate line,
interesting lines.
the Crux of Fate line is very dangerous here for Jim.
The fact that it's more than just a sweeper, that it can hit the non-dragons, does matter here. Jim's going to go for the straightforward one. He's going to make the Mantis Rider, put Sam to 2, and then, I guess, force Sam to deal with all these creatures.
Yeah, likely he'll cast Bramaz now after the fact. That means that if Sam goes ahead and casts Crux of Fate, Jim is left with the Ash Cloud Phoenix, and then it requires further gymnastics for Sam to be able to beat Ash Cloud Phoenix and the ability to unmorph it.
And so Sam will go ahead and block away Seeker of the Wave, which opens the door for possible Bile Blights here.
Yep.
But Sam down to 1. If Jim casts this face-down card, Sam will need 2 kill spells because there really is only 1 face-down card. He's going to go for Bramaz, though.
Yeah, I like Bramaz in this spot because it
Sam's
still
at
puts
1.
It still puts Sam in a spot where he needs to have a bunch of removal and most likely Crux of Fate to stay in the game. In the event that Sam has Crux of Fate, Jim is much better served keeping the Ash Cloud Phoenix in his hand than he is anything else.
Yeah, were Sam at 2, maybe Jim would have to go for the Ash Cloud Phoenix, but at 1, that's pretty decent. And yeah, this is Crux of Fate from Sam. He can choose non-dragons that'll take care of all the creatures. Jim's done a great job. Sam's done a great job of staying alive at 1. We'll see, though. Valorous Stance and Ash Cloud Phoenix, the remaining cards for Jim. He only needs to survive to a burn spell.
Valorous Stance is a very powerful draw here as well because he can cast the Ash Cloud Phoenix. If Sam follows up with a Solemnguard attack with a removal spell, keeps it alive, untaps,
it face up.
unmorphs, and wins the game. So Valorous Stance looks pretty bad here, but it's next to drawing a burn spell, this is probably the best draw in Jim's deck.
Yeah, I mean, there is some concern. So Sam blocked the Seeker of the Way last turn, which suggests that Sam might have a Bile Blight in hand, in which case the Valor Stance doesn't protect Ash Cloud Phoenix. That said, I think Jim still has to go for this play. It's too good to pass up.
Yep.
So he'll play a Morph.
Radiant Fountain, a pretty big draw here.
That's huge. That puts Sam up to 3. It makes the Ash Cloud Phoenix no longer lethal. It's got to be the draw that Jim didn't want to see. And he'll pass. No Bile Blight from Sam. Mystic Monastery, the draw for Jim. That Radiant Fountain made this a lot more difficult for Jim.
Yeah, Sam was in a pretty tough way before that Radiant Fountain, but now he has the ability to Jason's Ingenuity, and he might find a workaround for this Ash Cloud Phoenix.
Yeah, it seemed like Sam just needed to have the Bile Blight before the Radiant Fountain. And Jim has no choice but to play Monastery and pass, and here goes Jason's Ingenuity from Sam. Will Jim flip? Jim can flip face up in response here. We might see him do it. If he flips face up, they both go to 1. Jim can suicide the creature and then try to flip it again. But it does mean that does open him up to some things. And he decides to just let Sam have cards. And here's Drowned Catacomb. Sam slowly climbing up on life points.
But I think Sam mostly missed off of that Jason's Ingenuity. I think it was just lands.
All right. Now Jim is going to use End Step to flip up Ash Cloud Phoenix.
And for Sam, I think he's looking at removal spell or bust because he can't block the Ash Cloud Phoenix. He just turns it face down, and there's another unmorph that occurs as a result.
Yeah, both players take 2, so Jim at 10, and believe Sam down to 2. 2 certainly different than 3 here.
I think you just go into combat, attack, and
make him have it.
Yep. And it's pretty hard for him to have it because there's not a lot to have. He's pretty much jammed up here.
Here's a swing from Jim. It's Ash Cloud Phoenix. Yeah, at this point, I cannot think that there's a kill spell Sam could have. He could have Aether Spouts. That would save him.
Right.
Silumgar will go in front of Ash Cloud Phoenix. Ash Cloud Phoenix turns face down. Sam's at 2. Jim's probably goes to his main phase before Sam can play any sort of life gain land.
I think you go to the upkeep. Don't let him play any of his lands. Yep.
And there you go. Jim Davis, 2-1, defeats Sam Berkenbile and stays in the 1-loss bracket.
Very rare that we watch a game where Ash Cloud Phoenix does its thing like that, where it just basically locks someone out. But there against Sam and his blue-black deck, it was the last couple points of damage in a spot where I don't think there was a lot else in Jim's deck that could have gotten him across the finish.